Hello guys, I'm going to be going through user authorization and how we can use Express to log in and create users. And some of the key concepts we'll be going over in this video will be JSON Web Tokens, salt and hash, um, just basic Express stuff and SQLize, things like that. Uh, One thing I will say before we get started is it's not usually a good idea to store plain text passwords inside your database, because if anybody ever gets in there, then they will have access to all that information and your users will not be very happy with you. So what we do instead is when the user submits their password, we usually convert the password to a hash, which is basically an encrypted version of the password. That's what we store in the database. And then the salt is just something that helps us to create that hash. So let's get started. I will start by creating my uh, working directory. So let's do this. Create a server.js. Let's go into the terminal. And first I want to do npm init. Uh, yes, that's all good. Things we want to install in here. Let's go ahead and install. We want .env. We want Express. We want something called express.jwt or express.jot. We also want JSON Web Token, which is what JOT stands for. And then also SQLize, and since we have SQLize, we will need MySQL 2. Alright, so next step, we need to create our SQLize stuff, SQLize init. And let's see, I don't need this folder, and I don't need this folder. And let's go ahead and set this to an environment variable. Okay. Create our .env file. And here we will need two things. First, we need our local DB. And let's I already know the route. It's going to be root because I have my username and password at root and root localhost 3306 slash let's call this database user database. And also we need something called a JWT secret. This will become more apparent later on, but it can be pretty much anything you want. So let's go with peanut butter jelly time because I'm hungry. Okay, that's all we need there. Next step is to create our user model. So we need to create users.js, and just like any other SQLize model, we start with a module.export and we give it a function, equalize and data types. And let's set up a template. Return user. No, not URL search function. User. User. Semicolon. Doesn't like my semicolon for some reason. There we go. Var user equals equalize define You guys know how to do this. I don't need to explain it to you. We need 3 things here. We need our email, we need our hash, and our salt. So our email will be a string, so data types dot string, and we don't want it to be null. We want it to be unique, and also we need to validate it to make sure that they give us an email. True. Lovely things about SQLize is it has a lot of built-in validation, so you don't need to write any function that checks to see if it's an email or not. You can just check to see if it's an email. So our hash is also going to be a string. Remember, this is going to be our encrypted password. 1500 characters out, you know. And also, we don't want this to be null either. And our salt is also going to be a string. And that should be it for our users table. Now let's set up our server and make sure this this table is working. We need to first set up our dev environment. So var is dev equals v. And now let's add our dependencies. We will use Express. We need path here, so we can send along our HTML file. We will require our database. And also, we're going to require Express job. Set up our server. And our port. And our middleware. And like any good coder, I'm just going to copy and paste this because it's always the same. Now, the last thing we need to do to just get the database up and running, second last thing, is to just sync it. Sync. that's that. Let's create our database. And what did I call the database? User database. Okay, let's run this. Oh, you know what? I don't have my scripts set up. No, no. Okay, cool. Cannot get, but at least it's working. And our database is been created. Let's just double check to see if it's there. User database, tables, users. Cool, we got everything. Now we can start working on our API routes. Let's go ahead and create a folder called routes. And in here we want one called api.js. Let's shut this down. So we need two things in here. We need a creation route and a login route. Bar express equals router dot require express, and bar router equals require express dot router. Bar db equals require and module.exports equals router. So we need two routes. We need a new user route. Let's just call it new. And we also need a router.post login. Reason why this is going to be a post is because we need to send along a body, and you usually don't want to send along bodies with a put or a get request. Delete doesn't make sense, so post is just the most logical option. So function res function res. Okay, so we have our boilerplates done. So next thing we need is to create a few helper functions, because we're going to be using these functions multiple times. Might as well just wrap them inside functions. Actually, you know what? We might as well put the helper functions in a separate folder. Not here. There we go. And we're going to require that up here as well. we need to require two things in here. We need crypto, which is baked into Node, so you don't need to install this one. And we need job. Even though we have the same variable name as in server.js, this is a different job. This is JSON Web Token, not express-jwt. So this thing is going to have three functions. It's going to have get hash, which is going to take in two parameters, a password and a salt, and it's going to return one value. Return crypto.ppd. No, I'm just going to copy and paste this. So this is just another one of those things you just copy and paste. What this does is it converts this plain text password that we're passing it. It adds the salt to it and converts it to something called SHA-512, which is a type of encryption, and then converts that to a hexadecimal value. If you want to look up more on different types of encryption methods you can use, just Google crypto. But this is the one we're using right now, because as last I checked, as far as I know, SHA-512 has yet to be broken. There are some other encryption types that have been broken, so whatever you choose, just do your research on it before you use it. So this is just going to be a function with no parameters. All it really does is it returns a string of random characters in hexadecimal format once again. So it's just a bunch of random bytes, 16 of them, and converts it to a string. And finally, we need something called generate JWT. It takes one parameter, which is a user, and it's going to do several things. First, it's going to create an expiration date, new date. Let's set the expire date to 7 days from now. How about that? Seems like a decent time. And let's now we need to create our token. So our token equals JWT.sign ID. So this is basically converting the expiration date into a number of, I believe, seconds until its expiration time. And we need to give it one more parameter, which is going to be our JWT secret. So when we pass this token along, we're basically taking this user, which we're going to be getting from our database, and encrypting it with our secret that we set in our .env file. So our helpers are now done. We can create our new user API route. So let's first thing we have to do is get some salt. And now we can create a new user. let's trim it and to lowercase, and we need to get the hash now. So user helper dot get hash. We pass it the password that we wanted to encrypt, and the salt. And we also need to save the salt in our database, because how it works is when they try to log in, we're going to need to use this salt, the same salt we just generated over here, to get back to this this hash. The way this encryption works, it only goes one way. We cannot go backwards. If you try to decipher the password with any other salt, you won't get the same thing. I'm sorry, I say that wrong. If you you can't decipher the password. What you have to do is you just have to re-encrypt it. So if you try to encrypt with a different salt, you get a different hash. So that'll make sense in a second. So now that we have our user, we can add it to the database. So it was successful. So success true, message, tell them that user creation was successful. And also we need to pass along a token so that the front end can use this to validate the user login. So just pass it along this response object because it has all the information we need to generate the token. So Sequelize is going to give us back this response with the user data, which is going to be the ID, email, and email in there. It's also going to give it the hash and the salt, but it doesn't need it. It's just don't worry about it. So that should be it for that one. Just need to set up our catch just for error handling. Always a good idea to do this. And since it failed, we will pass along a message. Success false, message, user creation failed. And that should be it for the creation. Now we need to work on our login. So let's get the password and email from the user. Body.email or pass rect.body.password. So we use we use Sequelize to find one because we know these are unique values. Email. Function response. So what we need to do here is we need to double check that a user was found, because whether the database finds a user or not, it's will actually technically succeed. So it won't throw an error if you fail to find one. So this guy right here, it just won't run if it successfully finds nothing. I'll just set the template. So just check, is there a response? If yes, then we can handle that. If no response, we can just return an error message. That is the status 400. I'm sorry. That is dot status 404 because the user was not found. Not found. And in here, what we do now is we get our hash again. So we take that salt that we have stored in our database, and we use this password that the user just sent us along, try to convert it back to an encrypted password. Then we double check to see if it matches the encrypted password we have stored in our database. So if input hash equals response.hash, then we can res.json a successful message. Authorized, and send them the token. Else, if they sent us the wrong password, then we can just send them a error message saying that it was invalid attempt. And finally, handle our error. Awesome. So that's how you set up the login and the user creation routes. Now the last step is, how do we use this? So for that, I'm just going to copy and paste my index file, and I'm just going to walk you through that if I can find it. So it's just It's the usual stuff, Bootstrap, jQuery, all that stuff. The buttons that I want you to look at are the register button and the login button. They're basically the same thing here, so I'm just going to show you one. So all we do is we make a AJAX request to our API route, and we send along the email and the password. Then when we get our response back, what we want to do is we take that token that we got from our server and save it in our local storage, and we can use that for user validation. I'll go over this other stuff later. What else do I need to show you? Oh yeah. So last few steps is we just need to set up some stuff on our server. So we have our dependencies, we have our middleware, we need to add our routes. So app.use API/user, and we're going to require our API file. And let's also add a route for our index file. And now this is how you protect routes with the password. You have to use this package right here, express.jwt, express job. It is another piece of middleware. So all you have to do is jwt. You give it our secret that's in our env file. And user property payload. Okay, so I'm just going to create a route here that we can access just to see how it works. Good stuff. Okay. You should only see this if you are logged in successfully. Okay. So that should be it for our server. So let's go ahead and take a look at if it all works. So our server ran perfectly. Okay, we got our website. Let's create an account. fake@email.com and give it a password. Submit. Successful. User creation was successful. So click me, see what happens. Uh-oh. That was not supposed to happen. unauthorized error, JWTML. Oh, that's because it, yeah. Okay, so I know what went wrong. I forgot to return my token in my helper file. So let's see how it works now. There we go. Now we got our token back. Let's see what happens. Should only see this if I log in successfully. Okay, so let's try logging out. Uh-oh, unauthorized. Let's log back in. Login successful. We got a new token. Let's see what's in that token. Okay, so we got ID, email, our expiration date, and something else. I'm not sure what that is. But let's look at this HTML file and see what all these other buttons do, how they work. So the this button, click me, it only works if we're successfully logged in. So how we validate that login is when we make our GET request, we have to set along something called a header, which you can always just copy paste. Basically, it's just authorization bearer, and then we pass in the login token. Remember to add the space. I always forget the space, and I always get some errors. The space is important. And this button right here, the parse token, it's just to show you that you can send along certain encrypted information with the token. You can always access that information with this function right here, JSON.parse window A to B. That's the one, window A to B. And the reason we split it is because the format of the token has a dot in it. The stuff before the dot, you can parse it. The stuff after it, you won't be able to parse it. So that should be pretty much it. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message or ask me in class or office hours. Hope this guy helped you guys out. Have a good one.